let me kind of tell you how we came to be here tonight. As most of you are aware, sorry about that, got a little cold here. I was a principal, junior high school assistant principal over at the junior high school, and was in the Laramie school systems for 30 years. And so I saw a lot of stuff from my position. And here in November, a friend of mine, Irma Santa Stevens and Johnny Lara, we pal around, and Irma said, "Glenn, have you seen the new book out on Matthew Shepard?" And as I'm sure that a number of you are, it's, hey, that's old news, Why do we want to drag that up? And she said, "No, this, I think it's worthy of you reading it." So Irma let me have the book, and I didn't put it down for 2 days because I lived it. And this is the way I saw it as I, was going through the schools and working with these young people. And, I don't want to change anything. I don't want you to look at this in any other way. It was a tragedy that took place back then. And in no way am I trying to change that. But I think if we have the opportunity to look at it, through another person's eyes. I've told Stephen, if given the opportunity, I would like to have written this book. Because one of the nice things about my job is probably 99% of the kids that went through the junior high school came back, and, we are on, I don't want to say we're buds, but they'll tell me anything at this point, and we'll laugh about it. "Hey, do you remember this? Do you remember that?" And I've had a number of them come back, and, we would talk about stuff like drugs, alcohol use, and stuff that was going on at the junior high school and the high school and in the community. And I had a number of them that I knew that were involved in the drugs and the drug culture that came back to me and said, "Wow, that was not what it seemed to be, that, there were drugs, involved in that situation." And, it's one of those things, as a Laramie boy, I was born and raised here. I went to school. My 7th grade year, I was in this building. We had 7th grade through 12th grade here. We're talking 1959. I'm aging myself. 1959, 7 through 12, then they went on to the high school, and the first graduating class from the high school was the 1960-61 class. And so then the next year, we ended up having this great big building to ourselves, and, so Laramie, born and raised. And when I read this book, it just started, kind of a burning that, hey, I need to do more about this. And we're living in Loveland. I'm trying to find the right property to buy here in Laramie to get back. And so I was up here working, with Gary Espelin, one of my friends here, and we were looking at some property that we're working on. And I got a call from my wife saying, "Hey, Stephen Jimenez, who wrote the book, is going to be doing a reading of that book in Fort Collins." Well, I said goodbye real quick and made it down there just in time for Steve to come out and do his reading. And as I sat there, in that audience, and just, reliving it again, by the way, some of you, I don't know if you remember Diane Smith, who was a principal, where was Diane principal? At Indian Paintbrush? I'm not for sure. Linford. And thank you. I stand corrected. Anyway, Diane was there, and afterwards we talked a little bit, and I went up and introduced myself to Stephen and said, "Hey, I would really like to spend some more time with you and talking about this." And I said, why aren't you doing this in Laramie? And he said, "Glenn, I've not been invited." And so I said, "Hey, consider yourself invited." I will try my darndest, to get us together. And I guess where I am with this is I'm not telling you what to think. I'm asking you to read the book, and once you read the book, make up your own mind. See what the reason is. And by no means are we trying to, these young people that committed this, I don't want to change anything there. That was a tragedy. But don't we want to deal with the truth? And that was kind of the way I was looking at it. So over the course of, the last 2-3 months, we have put this together, and there are a number of us doing this, not just me. And so here we are tonight, and I would like, I want this to be educational. Number one, I want it to be informative, because I think that, there's a lot to be learned here. And if you have some questions like I did, please, we have the mic here. We welcome. In fact, we want your input. And so with, no further ado here, I'm going to turn this over to Ray Hageman. And Ray, again, as I said, was a radio announcer and was doing a lot of stuff in there. And he was right in the middle of this. And so I'm going to give it to you from a perspective of what he saw.
Thanks, you. Ray. I remember the morning after the attack and how this was going to be, looks like another crime. And there had been I guess, I wouldn't want to say a series of killings in Laramie, but at that time there had been a couple of other people who had been murdered. And so you were kind of getting used to going and visiting Calraruca and the folks at the Albany County Courthouse. And so what struck me as kind of insane, really, though, was that within a very short time, and there's a chapter in the book called Wildfire that Steve talks about how the narrative of this incident quickly went wild. And the way the national media descended upon this town and I thought unfairly characterized its citizens. There was a lot of stories that I think people who lived here, when they read them in the papers, when they saw them being reported on television, just shook their head and said, no, that's not this town. And just an anecdote from that. We were sitting in the courthouse between the court proceedings. It was early on in all of this. And I was sitting next to a couple of network reporters. And they knew each other. They were talking back and forth and basically just speculating on what the next thing in the process was going to be. And what do you think is going to happen? Well, I don't know. This is what I think is going to happen. What do you think is going to happen? And this went on back and forth. Well, an hour or so later, I went back to the radio station to put together a newscast, and we had a television on there. And I was watching the television, and one of the reporters was doing a live stand-up, and he said, sources inside the Albany County Courthouse are speculating that the next move in this process is going to be, and then he started relating the story that he was talking with the other fella. And technically, the story was correct. There was a source inside the Albany County Courthouse. But in the age of 24-hour news, you've got to fill time. And that's essentially what they were doing. And I have a couple of questions that I'd like to ask Steve about that, about why the media refuses to let go of a narrative once they've established it. And so it was an interesting front row seat, I guess, if you will, to see how this process works. So I'm going to read from the book jacket here about Steve. And when this book came out, I had saw some initial press reports on the internet and ran over to Barnes & Noble to pick it up, and they had still not yet unpacked it out of the boxes. The lady asked, she didn't recognize the book. I asked her to look it up. She found it. She said, well, just a second. I think we have got it in the back room. And she went and found it for me, and so I ended up getting it.